Trump tweeted, Walmart, a great indicator as to how the U.S. is doing, just released outstanding numbers. Our country, unlike others, is doing great. Don't let the fake news convince you otherwise, the president wrote. Joining us now is the U.S. economics editor at The Economist magazine, Soumaya Keynes. She has a new piece in the new issue entitled, Under Attack, the Trade War is Leading Some Firms to Crimp Investments. Soumaya, good to see you this morning. Expand a little bit on the headline from that piece. How much of the sort of the fears of recession that we're seeing right now, not just in the United States, but around the world, come from the institution of tariffs from the United States?
Yeah, so my piece looked into that question, and I think the first point to make is that these tariffs are affecting a large fraction of trade between the US and China. But when you put them in the context of the US economy, they're just not that big. So mechanically, they shouldn't be enough to tip the US economy into recession. However, I think more important than that mechanical effect is all the uncertainty that these tariff announcements are creating. Businesses don't know what's about to happen. That could encourage them to put off investment. And there is survey evidence that suggests that businesses are holding back on investment. And so that the fear then is that if they start to hold back on investment, perhaps later down the line, they'll start to hold back on hiring. And if that means that American shoppers have less money in their wallets, maybe they'll spend less, and maybe there could be a sort of downward spiral in confidence, and that could mean that things really start to go wrong.
Soumaya, this is Yasmin Vasugian. Obviously, we've talked a lot about the fact that the economy is the calling card for the president ahead of 2020. If this economy begins to tank, as is being predicted, that we could feasibly see a recession in 17 months or so, which lands us directly after the general election in November. If you were advising 2020 Democratic candidates leading up to the elections, what would be your advice in going after the president when it comes to this economy?
I think for a lot of Democrats, the president's fight with China, they agree with that. They would agree that there are problems with Chinese behavior. I think it's the unpredictability of the president's behavior that has been generating a lot of the problems. And so I would suggest that they really hammer him on that. I would suggest that, at the moment it's not clear, one day it's on, one day it's off, no one really knows what's happening. Part of the problem is that America has really gone after China pretty much on its own. So I would really encourage them to essentially hammer the president for doing that and suggest that perhaps America should work with its traditional allies rather than threatening tariffs on them, right? If we start to see tariffs on Europe, as has been threatened, maybe even Japan, then that just adds more fuel to this small fire that is going on right now.
This is Susan Del Percio. One quick question on Michigan. We know it's hurting. President Trump's polls numbers are hurting there. It could also have to do with the fact that GM's closing plants there. And can you talk a little bit about how that's hurting the economy there?
Yeah, so the cars sector isn't doing particularly well right now. There has kind of been a bit of sort of topping out in demand. There was a post-recession recovery of autos demand that seems to be ending. We've got big shifts within the autos industry towards electric vehicles. So there's a lot of things are changing, right? And then you have this new trade deal that the Trump administration agreed, and I know that the car companies are planning on how to respond to that and rejigging things. So there's lots of disruption. I think it's related to the trade war. The tariffs are certainly not helping. If you're a car maker, you're importing some components from China. Those are now being hit by a lot of tariffs. That is not making you happy. We saw in the last election that people who were more affected by the China shock swung towards Donald Trump, so he clearly triggered that. So now the question is whether they blame him for not fixing it, and in some cases making the situation worse.
All right, Soumaya Keynes, thank you very much. We'll be reading your reporting in the new issue of The Economist. Joe, before we go to break, some breaking news on the most important story of the morning.